Hey everybody, welcome back to another video. So today I want to talk about The First Third by Neal Cassady. The First Third is a partial autobiography written by Neal Cassady, which focuses on the first third of his life, his early childhood. And this book was published in the year 1971, a couple years after Neal Cassady had died in the year 1968. So this autobiography is incomplete. The first third being his early childhood, his second third being his adulthood, which is not covered in this book, and the third third being the portion of his life that he didn't live. Neal Cassady's life was incomplete, so it's kind of reflective of that to have his autobiography be incomplete as well. And this copy is the 1981 edition. So the 1981 edition includes a prologue which goes into some details about his ancestors who first came to the United States, and at the end it includes a bunch of fragments of different letters that Neal Cassady wrote, different odds and ends he wrote over the years that were included in the initial publication of The First Third in 1971. Neal Cassady is best known as the character Dean Moriarty in Jack Kerouac's book On the Road. Dean Moriarty was based off of Neal Cassady. And not only is the plot of On the Road based off of Jack Kerouac's friendship with Neal Cassady, the writing style of On the Road is based off of the writing style of Neal Cassady and a couple letters that he had sent Jack Kerouac a couple years before On the Road was written. So Neal Cassady's influence on the road goes very, very deep, especially his writing style. But I will say that this book is not reflective at all of the writing style that Neal Cassady is known for in the letters that he sent Jack Kerouac. The writing style in this is very rigid, just very formal. It's very well written, but it just doesn't have any of that stream of consciousness, the free-flowing stuff that he wrote. You can tell that Neal Cassady worked very, very hard on writing what was published here, but I think the problem is that he worked too hard on it, and it just doesn't capture that free-flowing stream of consciousness writing that he's most well known for in his letters. This book mostly focuses on his childhood growing up in Denver with his father, who was a barber, and then he kind of just became a bum, kind of a wandering person who kind of lived in Skid Row in Denver. So Neal Cassady grew up with his father in Skid Row of Denver. So he had a very, very interesting childhood, very unique childhood. It definitely, I'd say Neal Cassady had a lot of issues in his life. I think a lot of his issues stem from his chaotic childhood growing up as a bum in Denver with his father. And as the childhood went on, him and his father traveled quite a bit around the United States. They spent a lot of time hitchhiking, train hopping, all around the American West. So definitely a very unique childhood that most people don't live. He just kind of grew up traveling on the road around America. Neal Cassady is known for being this big traveler around America. So you can see where this came from. It came from his childhood traveling around America. And I know later in life, Neal Cassady had a lot of problems with his family life. And you can see in this book that he lived with his father, but he had a lot of problems with his mother's side of the family. He didn't get along with his siblings on that side of the family. You can see that in this book it really highlights where all of his problems later in life originated from. And I think what this book does a good job of showing is how Neal Cassady is really the embodiment of the Beat Generation, because he grew up in the 1930s during the Great Depression. This Beat Generation is very disillusioned, in the 1950s, and it kind of shows how he grew up in this very difficult time period, 1930s, 1940s America, or a very difficult time period to grow up. So I think that's what a lot of the disillusionment that the Beat Generation had came from those decades, and Neal Cassady really experienced the worst what those decades had to offer for America. And like I said before, Neal Cassady is known for his writing style, and it's kind of strange that his only published work doesn't really represent his writing style at all. I will say that it's well written, but it doesn't really stand out as anything unique. But I think what it shows is that Neal Cassady was an important part of the Beat Generation, but he really wasn't a writer in the sense that Jack Kerouac was, or like a poet in the sense that Allen Ginsberg was. But Neal Cassady was a letter writer. He wrote letters. The letters are what he's known for. So in the way that Allen Ginsberg was a poet, Neal Cassady was a letter writer and a talker. He's very well known for the way that he talked. He would just kind of ramble on and on and on forever about many different topics, talking about the same things, or talking about different things at the same time. Just a very chaotic way of talking, a very unique way of talking that he had, and that's kind of what his letters were like. His letters are very just stream of consciousness, just kind of going from one thought to the next. Just a very unique way of communicating. So in the way that the different figures in the Beat Generation, like the way Jack Kerouac was a great writer, Allen Ginsberg was a poet, Neal Cassady was a letter writer, I think what it shows is that the Beat Generation wasn't necessarily just about writing, it was about communication in general. These people just had a very different way of communicating, and it wasn't really a way to communicate that was documented, before the Beat Generation came about. So that's what I feel like Neal Cassady is best known for. And oftentimes when reading this book, I tend to wonder how much of what he's writing is actually the truth. I mean, I think a lot of it is based off of what really happened. Most of it is very true. But every so often I'm just reading it and I just feel like He definitely embellishes things here and there. I don't always know when he's telling the truth in this book. So although this book is very interesting, it's definitely, I think, a must-read if you want to really understand Neal Cassady, but just for an average reader of Beat Generation literature, I wouldn't say it's a must-read at all, and also from the fact that you don't really know how much of it is true. But I will say, if you want to read about Neal Cassady's life, there's 2 different biographies that were written about him that I think cover his life a little better. Those biographies definitely pull information from this, but they pull out what's necessary, they pull out what's truth, and they identify what's fiction. It definitely covers his life a little better than this book does. But like I said, if you really want to understand Neal Cassady, it's definitely a must-read, but for everyday people, I don't think it's really a must-read. So yeah, not much to say about it. That's the first third by Neal Cassady, and be sure to subscribe, and we'll see you in the next book review.